On this episode of AV Week, we talk about patents in the AV industry, what it means to be green AV, and who owns the control code. All that and more next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 380, recorded Friday, December 7th, 2018. Citizens of Earth.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Christie Digital and by FSR.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information we have gathered this week, first and foremost, his name is Jeremy Caldera, and he is from IAS Technology. How are you, sir?
I am well. How are you?
I am good. Happy Friday.
Yeah, you too.
Also with us is a guy that I like because his name's Tim. His name is Tim Trost, and he's from Milestone and LeGrand AV. Welcome, sir.
Well, hello, Tim.
And last but not least, I have been trying to get this guy on forever and a day. I met him for the first time a little over a year ago. Very nice gentleman. His name is Dan Friese, and he is the relatively new editor of Sound and Communications magazine. Welcome, sir.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, guys, our first story here comes to us from AV Network and SCN, talking about QSC's newest patent. QSC was awarded U.S. patent 9,973,938. This is not going to be a test at the end. For the ability to bring an IP camera stream to the USB video class of soft codec applications such as Zoom, GoToMeeting, and others. The patent does not specify that this is from a QSys system specifically, but indicates it is a broader reaching IP camera stream to USB video insert. This allows QSC and others, if they want to license the technology, to take in multiple video streams and select which stream to send them to the soft codecs. Jeremy, I want to start with you on this. What is this going to mean for QSCs and others moving forward to get this technology and get it into a patent form where they're putting kind of a stake in the ground saying, this is something that we want to start doing?
As soon as you sent me this article to read, I was very happy to see it, right? I mean, I hate running all these cables to these conference room tables and having to use these, whether it's an IP to USB bridge or some kind of USB extension or something like that. And it's another cable that's got to be plugged into the laptop. This is going to eliminate that. And it's going to make it cleaner. It's going to make it friendlier. It's going to just be all around great. And just for that reason alone, I'm really excited about this.
Do you think it's going to help in the design spec as well, where you're, as a designer and as an integrator, you're able to kind of call out, here's just basically video drops? Yeah,
it could help with that. Where it's going to complicate things is ensuring certain things are on the network and set up properly, correct? I mean, that's a problem we have now just inherently with everything else in our world. And there's still a lot of companies out there that are isolating the AV systems on a separate network. So, I mean, I've done some systems where the QSC camera, for example, would be on the AV network, but then their computer is on their own corporate network, and the bridge is the bridge between, right? So this is going to help with, solidifying all of that onto one network, but it's going to add some complexity to the integration with the IT departments. But, it's give and take one way or the other. So I like it. I like it as a designer.
Yeah. Tim, Middle Atlantic is the owner of a handful of their own patents.
Yes.
I mentioned what's this going to take to do for, not just QSC, but other companies as well. When you guys work with other companies that may or may not be interested in licensing your technology, how does that process work exactly?
Yeah, typically there's a negotiation that goes on to understand how important or relevant the patent is. And you could even discuss this more broadly than patents and just the intellectual property of a particular manufacturer and whether partnering makes sense, licensing makes sense, and what that business agreement is. We have not chosen to license any of our patents, but across the broader LeGrand family, we do leverage our collective intellectual property in many products. It makes us all better, delivers better end solutions to the market, to the customers, reduces the cost of innovation, and therefore gets better products into the marketplace at more competitive pricing.
You mentioned intellectual properties, across the Legrand AV brand. Specifically, though, you're talking about internally to your guys' group.
Legrand AV, Legrand North America, Legrand globally, we leverage the technology and the assets that exist within the portfolio as much as possible.
When you do that, though, because yes, technically you guys are all over under the Legrand brand, is that something where it's engineers getting together in a room or in a video conference and saying, this is what we have and this is kind of how you can leverage it?
Yeah, it's really cool. We get together a couple times a year to review some of those assets, understand the development projects that are underway within all the brands and the business units, and regularly an engineer in an adjacent or sometimes non-adjacent industry or market will say they've got a little nugget for that. We ran into that most recently with our DC distribution products, where we had no idea there was some intellectual property that existed in part of our building controls business. And so we're able to take some of those parts and pieces and bring them into the AV industry, give the AV industry a better solution, and again, at a more competitive price point.
Yeah, that's really cool. Dan, this patent was filed January of 2016, so darn near 3 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
Is nobody else doing that? I mean, I know that sounds like a silly question, but is nobody else doing this that where QSC could legitimately say, this is something that we've created that's new and unique?
It certainly seems like, I can't necessarily say that no one else is doing this, but it definitely seems like QSC is at the absolute cutting edge of this. I recently had a call with Patrick Hain over there, and he basically said as far as QSC systems goes, they view themselves primarily as transitioning to being a software company. That's what they aspire to be at this point. And obviously they have their three different divisions. They have the cinema division, they have the pro division that covers live sound, they have the systems division, but he said aspirationally they're looking in, becoming a software company, which is amazing considering that for all the years I've been in AV, even before my editorship of Sound and Communications, you think of QSC with their amps, with their speakers, with their mixers, to now define themselves as aspiring to be a software company, and with QSys becoming more and more ubiquitous and just, more and more releases, more and more developments. It's really an exciting time. So whether they're alone in the field, I can't say that, but they certainly seem to be at the forefront.
Well, I want to drill down a little bit on what you said about them becoming a software company. I don't know about you, and I ask you this specifically: they're not unique though in that, as far as the AV companies that you and I both cover. A lot of companies are saying, yes, we still make boxes, yes, we still make parts and pieces, but we're leading with software. Are you finding that more and more?
Yeah, certainly. A lot of people are talking about the no-box solution. They're talking about moving away from hardware, and obviously that aligns with an overall shift toward increased simplicity, an overall shift toward IT-centricness. It just seems like we're evolving beyond the box to a large extent, and whether it's Utelogy or whether it's QSC, companies are leading with software by and large.
All right, Jeremy, last question, because I want to bring you in on this real quickly. What does that then do to integrators if AV companies are leading with software?
Yeah, that makes it complicated. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time. For me, it comes down to, now it's service. I mean, we're still going to have to sell a display, but you're getting rid of everything else, right? And then displays, there's zero margin to make on selling displays. So it really comes down to, I think, a doubling down in investment in your people and perhaps the services that you provide as an integration company, right? There's so much more that we can do with SLA contracts, I think, that are going to become more and more important to just operability and maintenance and just ensuring that experience is maintained at all these organizations. And that's, if it's going without equipment in one direction, that's how it's going to be in the other direction.
Just to tag on to what Jeremy said, though, I think as much as companies are integrating software into some more traditional systems, leading with softwares, there's more and more subsystems that'll want to be controlled. So whether or not everything goes into the display, we could talk about just the simple AV system that's enabling us to have this podcast right now, but then start to tie it into lighting control, HVAC, room occupancy, and then ultimately energy efficiency within the spaces when they're occupied or unoccupied. So there's always going to be, from my perspective, more work to do to stay on the edge and ahead of the competitors, albeit the centralization or consolidation of many disparate systems.
Right. It's the expansion of what your product offering and what your service offering has to be, right? That's why I'm saying it's doubling down on investment of your people to do that. And I mean, and we're still always going to have the larger specialized rooms that have tons of hardware and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, the everyday stuff's going to start to go away and you know, dwindle down to that software only type application. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Our next story comes to us, a guest blog in AV Magazine about green AV. Walter Bonte from Barco writes about the company's Barco's efforts in creating a green AV business environment. Bonte writes that Barco helps their quote-unquote live events partners reduce their carbon footprint by designing more energy-efficient video solutions, end quote. Bonte goes on to explain that Barco not only produces green AV products, they also invest in green AV, green manufacturing models. Tim, I want to start with you as the manufacturer on here. Do integrators and honestly, by extension, customers, their clients, care about the green process and care about green products or care about how green you are in your manufacturing processes?
Yeah, I'd say we see it more and more. From a specification standpoint, it's becoming more frequent that there's compliance, especially, as we all know, government contracts. California is a heavy influence on the requirements, especially with like Prop 65 and labeling and components within. You know, I would have said 5 years ago when I'll use the AVIXA, formerly Infocom energy management standard, was introduced, wasn't really well received. More recently, though, it's becoming more requested from us to be able to provide energy consumption in the product or in the AV system. And so monitoring and management of an AV system will help lead to LEED certification. Most of what we do helps contribute to LEED certification, won't give you certification. It's not a significant enough component of natural resource utilization. So you have on that side designing products as Barco has done to be more energy efficient, but then also in the actual product itself, the components that take place, RoHS requirements, for example, and then within the packaging, ensuring recyclability. You know, integrators don't want to sit around and have to sort garbage and you know, packaging material, what's recyclable, what's not recyclable. So choosing to go the path of recyclability and green just makes the whole experience better, and obviously is better for the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, with the companies that you cover and the integrators that you talk to, are you finding that this is becoming more and more of an ask, more and more of a requirement from integrators?
I have to say that in terms of the conversations I've had, the projects that we've profiled, the POVs and op-eds that we've solicited, it doesn't seem to be top of mind from the integrators and the end user clients I've spoken to. But having read the blog, there are a lot of different tentacles, so to speak, of this that I think should be thought about, whether it's minimizing weight and bulkiness as far as transport costs, whether it's recyclability, whether it's trade-in programs so that different components can be reused or refurbished for existing installations. It isn't something I've heard a tremendous amount about, but I see the value proposition as being very, very persuasive. So I think it perhaps is something that we as thought leaders, and Barco in this case as being a thought leader, should try to be an expositor of and try to defend the importance of it, because it is not something I hear a tremendous amount about day to day.
Jeremy, when it comes to kind of figuring out what products you're going to use, and yes, you are a dealer of, and you have relationships with manufacturers, but when you're looking at maybe bringing on somebody new and maybe they have a system in place, like Mid-Atlantic, where they have their processes are green and they do things like that, and they can give you certifications for that, or the products are Energy Star compliant, or they use less energy. What's the biggest factor in considering maybe bringing on a new company or a new product, or when you're trying to get an energy efficient system design to add to LEED certification?
I'll be honest with you, I have not had to do much of that. Even my large clients, they really don't care. And I hate to be so frank about it. They just don't, right? And I've had some larger clients who have had LEED certification for their buildings, things like that. And we have talked to them about how do we, bring the AV systems into this, and how do we discuss all this? And it ultimately came down to, well, there's not enough there to care, right? We don't even want to handle the paperwork because everything else will get us LEED certified. So we don't, do whatever you need to do, right? So for me, when I'm talking about vendors, I mean, I like the idea of Energy Star amplifiers now that will shut down when there's no signal after so much time, because now I don't have to put a sequencer in place, right? So it's just overall, just the way I think about how I do my designs and how that, type of, green business or energy efficient type stuff is working in that realm, right? Where I haven't had to go down the LEED pathway as of yet. And, we've done some whole building systems too, where I was ready to jump through the hoops for the LEED certification, and they just said, don't even worry about it. Just give us the information. If we need it, we need it. If we don't, we don't. And then it never went any further, which was very surprising to me. It's not top of mind for myself either, because my clients aren't asking for it. That's not to say that it shouldn't be considered. Like I said, I take considerations for, just other aspects of the design, like I said, but, maybe as a good person of Earth, we need to do that.
I think that's right. I think it is something that we should be talking more about and thinking more about. When we profile, whether it's government facilities, corporate facilities, entertainment facilities, as you know, we explore a 360-degree angle, and very few of them do we find people proactively talking about the energy efficiency steps that they've taken, or the ways that they've tried to minimize transportation overhead. I don't hear it that much, but it probably should be something we as citizens of Earth and as members of the industry should be thinking about more often.
I feel like, listen, I'm not someone who's going to quote numbers on this, but just a gut feeling of mine says that any energy efficiency that I do in a system design could be immediately negated by the carbon offset of the shipping if it's not shipped right, or as a group, right? I mean, I don't know if those numbers are true or not, but I feel like, taking consideration from end to end is important, but how do we do that? How do we manage that? And where's that going to go going forward? I think we're going to see it a lot more. I think it's going to be more push down government mandated type stuff. Like we're seeing that in a lot of the bills that are passed and the LEED certifications and all that kind of thing, that we have to start considering that. And that's what's ultimately going to drive this, because I'll be honest with you, I don't feel like the customers will.
The other place too is in air quality, right? So in some of the materials being used, especially on the wood side, Green Guard certification becomes important in education and such. So we talked a lot about energy management, but air quality is definitely an important one in buildings.
Very good. Last story here comes to us from Sound and Communications and writer Douglas Klieger about who owns the code. Now, for those of you who have only started listening to AVNation, this is a reminder. I am a recovering control systems programmer. Douglas makes a really good point in his very first line, quote unquote, "I thought this issue was resolved years ago." As did I, Douglas, as did I. So we're going to go through this. Klieger goes on in his blog to write about, describe a situation a fellow consultant kind of relayed to him. The system was less than a year old. It didn't work, never worked, quote unquote. Client wasn't happy. One of the biggest issues, though, was the control system never worked the way it was designed. Client was looking to get another contractor, another integrator in to fix the system, but lacked the uncompiled code. Really quick aside. In control systems, there is a compiled code and uncompiled code. Compiled code is something that you can, you shoot somebody once the system is done, but you cannot edit it by and large. Uncompiled code is the editable version of the control systems code. Douglas contacted a friend of his at the original integrator, inquiring about getting the code, and was told categorically, no, we don't do that. Real quickly, my first entrance into the AV industry was as a technology manager at a small community college in Southwest Illinois, just outside of St. Louis. 2 months on the job, we had a system that we had to have repaired. And again, I didn't know the word Crestron, Extron, middle, anything, right? I came from broadcasting and was kind of dropped into this. And we had to have a projector replaced, actually, was what it was. Got the bill back for having it done. The cost to adjust the code was more than the cost of the projector. I'm not going to tell you how much it was, nor who the integrator was. But that experience actually led me to become a control systems programmer, because I thought it was astronomical. I thought it was outrageous that I had to pay so much to adjust the code. And here's the thing that really gets me still to this day, some, years later. I know how much work it took to adjust that code. It was 10 minutes worth of work. And so that's what still gets me about this conversation. Steve Greenblatt and our guys over at State of Control have done episodes on this. People have written about this for years. Josh Schrager, our buddy who is actually on his way to become a lawyer right now, it has talked about this and the differences between intellectual properties and what exactly is the real ownership of this. And intellectual property is actually one of the things that folks who don't give up their code stand on. Like this is something that we made. Obviously, my opinion, if you haven't gathered by now, is that yes, the client owns the code because it's a work for hire. But that's as much as I'll go on that. Dan, I'm going to start with you because it's from your magazine.
Mm-hmm.
Simple question: who do you think owns the code?
I try not to editorialize too much, but I am inclined to agree.
This article, then.
I'm inclined to agree with Douglas. Now, I do want to say, though, he received 2 pieces of feedback, which he forwarded to me. And I just kind of want to bring up to the group for their opinion. The one person whose feedback he forwarded to me, who disagreed with him, I thought put forth arguments, although they may not be sound, were better than the argument in the article, which is, oh, we don't make enough points of margin to be able to give you access to the code. The person who emailed said, A, does the client have the skills or ability to work with the code? Are they going to essentially do damage to the programming because they think they're able to do something and they're actually not able to? So we're opening up a can of worms by giving them access to workings they may or may not be able to work with. Also, the idea that this is the intellectual property of the programmer or the integrator, and I guess there could potentially be concern about that intellectual property making its way either to a competitor or to someone that would essentially damage the integrator's ability to make use of that intellectual property in the future for other clients. Those, to me, whether or not they're sound, seem better than saying, oh, we don't make enough points of margin to give you the programming, so it's up to you.
And I will agree with you, and I'll just address those at the very end once I give Jeremy and Tim an opportunity here. Jeremy, you're an integrator. When you do a control system, who owns the code at the end of the job?
My opinion, it's the client, right? They've hired us to do a job. We're doing the job. We're performing it. If I'm doing my job well, then I'm not concerned about them taking my code and giving it to somebody else. At the same time, it's not like this code is so easily just, hey, let's just install it on this job, right? I mean, that's not really how that works, right? I mean, we know that this stuff is just, it's very customized for the individual jobs and whatnot for there. I don't know. I mean, I could see the intellectual property argument when you're talking about the writing of advanced modules within the code, right? Maybe there's an intellectual property argument to be made there. But I don't think it's for the code itself. Now, it's interesting enough that today, just this morning, my programmer for here came into me and said, hey, we just got this new job. We don't have the source code for that. It's not on the control system like I thought it would be. I'm like, oh, all right. Well, I know the other integrator that did it, who we got the job from, and I called him up, and I know his stance on this too. And I said, hey, we got this project now. Can you send me over the code? I had it in 10 minutes.
Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. But they have the same stance that I have, partially because that's where I learned my stance on control system code, right? Because 10 years ago, I was in the other camp where it was like, no, you have to pay us to do it, because I was in sales and I wanted to make the sale. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to pay him somebody else, right? But like I said, I've come around to the fact that if I do a good job on that, who cares? You know what I mean? It's not the intellectual property of the individual components of that code. It's just code for how it works.
Yeah. Tim, what sort of IT or software idea or software stance can we kind of apply to this part of the AV industry, or is there one?
It's a good question. You got me thinking now. I mean, I would say I agree with the panel on the subject, just to start there. And I mean, if we rewind back to the beginning of this discussion back into IP and patents, there are other ways to protect something than holding it hostage from the person who paid for it. And so, I think as an industry and more broadly, as we talked about, software is becoming more readily available, more ubiquitous. People have a set of expectations of what they should get when they buy an experience. The software is part of what drives that experience, and they've made that purchase. And I think, frankly, unless it's made explicitly clear in the negotiations that the code isn't included, or maybe there's a pricing model to be associated with that, whether or not somebody gets the code. But just as a manufacturer, we provide as much as reasonably possible, and in order to make all of the systems work effectively, to provide a great user experience for both the person designing and installing the system, as well as the people who are using the system. And we'll protect what we need to protect behind that in order to ensure a competitive advantage.
And the excellent user experience, I think, is a really important thing. I mean, obviously, that is the focus now of our industry, from the Infocom to Avixa name change, et cetera. It's all about what the user experience is. And if we're having someone who is completely unhappy with their system is essentially non-functional 9 months into the system's birth, that doesn't reflect well on our industry. It's certainly not aligned well with a user-centric focus, a user experience focus. So we can get into some of the philosophical and esoteric stuff, but it's also just a matter of, do we have satisfied clients who will speak well on behalf of our industry and AV practitioners in general? And it sounds like in this case, they would not speak well, especially because they're being given the runaround. No, you have to speak to him, no, speak to her, speak to him. It's, I'm not responsible, you're responsible. It's really kind of the worst picture of our industry.
Yeah, I think, and if the industry doesn't support it and provide the experience, some of the digital giants out there will continue to build it into their technology, their capabilities, further eliminating the opportunity we have within AV, and as Jeremy mentioned before, kind of build it into a TV and make meeting spaces a single box you hang on the wall.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, that is going to do it for us. I have so much more to say. It's not even funny, but we're up against time, so we'll leave it there. Mr. Jeremy Caldera, thank you, sir. How do people find you?
iastechnology.net, or you can get me on the Twitter, which is at Jeremy_Caldera.
All right, very good. Mr. Trost, thank you, sir. How do people find you or LeGrand AV or Middle Atlantic?
Thank you. You can find us at legrandav.com and see our portfolio of brands there, including Middle Atlantic. You can always find me on Twitter at Timothy Trost.
All right, very good. And Ms. Farisi, thank you, sir, so much. It was a pleasure to have you. Like I said, I've been trying to get you on for a while, and I'm glad that we could make it happen. How do people find you or Sound and Communications?
Sure, soundandcommunications.com, very unique web URL, and on social media, it's Sound and Com.
All right, very good. My name is Tim Albright. Don't follow me on the Twitters because the Bears are still winning-ish mostly. So that's what you'll get from me is cheering on the Bears. But go by the website, AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others, including our other weekly program, ResiWeek, looks at the residential side of the AV industry. Also, while you're there, check out our third annual AVNation Awards. We do it a little bit differently than some folks. There's 2 steps to this. So the month of December, you get to nominate your favorite manufacturers in education and training and this, that, and the other. So you can go by the website, nominate your favorites, and then at the end of the month, we will compile all of the top vote getters for that. And then you will vote in January. And actually, we're going to do kind of a bracket system every week for that. So check that out. Also, check out we have our next webinar is January 16th on AV network security. Also, while you're there, check out our supporting section. These are the companies that support us financially, help us bring you AVWeek and ResiWeek and ISE in 2 months. And Middle Atlantic is one of those. So we thank them for their support. So check all that out and more at avnation.tv, avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That's all the time we have for AV Week.